Hello my beautiful students, welcome back to Chapter 2, Culture and Biology. In this chapter, we're going to explore some of the very basic elements of culture and biology. How do they relate with one another? Now, there are some elements in our local culture that we kind of accept as normal. But really, we ask the question, what is normal? What is normal to you may be considered to be unusual to some cultures. And what is considered normal for some cultures might be considered to be unusual in your eyes. Now, let's have a look at the concept of culture. What is culture? Basically, culture is all that human beings learn to do, to use, to create, to know, to believe as they mature and live out their lives in the social groups to which they belong. It's basically a guide for living in a particular society. What are some of the things that you need to do in Malaysia to be considered as normal? Let's have a look at the relationship between our culture and our biology. Human beings, like all other creatures, have basic biological needs. What do we need to do to survive? We eat, we drink, we need a place to stay, we need to sleep. But unlike animals, we learn different ways to fulfill those needs. What did you have for breakfast or lunch today? Nasi lemak, chap fan, wonton mee, nasi goreng, char kway teow, sandwich. What do you like to drink? Coke, coffee, teh tarik, bubble tea? We continually develop new ways to satisfy our most basic needs as human beings. Next up, let's have a look at culture shock. What is culture shock? Culture shock is the term used by sociologists to describe the difficulty people have adjusting to a new culture that differs markedly from their own. Basically, what it means is when you enter into a new culture. Now, this can be a new country. This can be a totally new environment. For example, as a secondary school student, I think most of you were secondary school students. You move from secondary school to college. When you graduate from college, you move into the working world. The first time that you move out from your house and you move out and you live by yourself, you'll find ways to take care of yourself. Those are examples of times that we can experience culture shock. Culture shock can also be experienced within a person's own society. You think you might know everything about your own culture, but even Malaysia, even Kuala Lumpur is a big place. I'm sure there are many things that you yourself do not know about your own hometown. And this can be quite shocking. Now, what are some of the examples of culture shock? For me, I was very fortunate to get a scholarship to study overseas in Japan. When I was studying overseas in Japan, I found quite a lot of things that gave me quite a huge culture shock. For example, for such an advanced country as Japan, it's a surprisingly cash-based society. Now, as an international student there, the most convenient way to pay would be, of course, using the credit card. But I've constantly had the trouble that I found that a lot of places in Japan, Tokyo even, actually don't accept credit cards. Now, of course, the major department stores and the big restaurants, most of them do accept credit cards. But a lot of places actually don't accept credit cards. Japan overall is a very, very cash-based society. Another thing that really shocked me was the idea of public baths. Now, Japan has 4 seasons, and the Japanese, they really love their public baths. Even though they might have their own shower or their own bathroom, they enjoy going to communal baths. Basically, it was a big shock for me. Basically, what happens is you take off all your clothes, you get naked. I think for many of us, getting naked is quite an awkward and uncomfortable thing to do. I mean, not everyone is comfortable with getting naked. And when I say naked, I mean like naked, completely naked. Okay, it was a really culture shock experience for me. Okay, to take off all your clothes and everybody takes bath in the same public bathtub. Okay, and that's where a lot of Japanese actually, they like to mingle, they like to get to new people, they chit-chat. It's sort of like a pub or a bar, where you go there and to mingle with different people. Another thing that I was really shocked about Japan was it was a really, really safe country. I mean, we hear that all the time, but you don't really realize it until you see it. I mean, what I've observed is you can see little kids as young as 6 or 7 years old walking by themselves in the middle of the night. I mean, like from studying in their friend's house and walking back to their way home. So this was very, very surprising, and I think it's something that we can never see in Malaysia. I mean, kids walking alone by themselves without being accompanied by an adult. So culture shock is something that every single one of us will encounter when transitioning into a different phase of our life. Now, let's have a look at these two terms: ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. Two very, very opposite words. What is your first reaction when you encounter someone who is very, very different from you? Someone who does things which you never really think about, that is so strange and so unusual. Is what they are doing stupid, wrong, or just plain weird? So we come down to these two terms. People very often make judgments about other cultures according to customs and values on their own. Sociologists call this ethnocentrism. Basically, you see your own personal culture as the only culture that is right, and any culture that is different from your own is wrong. Let me give you an example. The university that I attended in Japan had people from all different countries, including Malaysia, Singapore, India, the US, all over the world. When my Japanese floor mate saw my Indian friend eat rice for the first time with his hand, that's how Indians customarily eat their rice, they found it absolutely weird and even disgusting. Okay, to dig your hands into the rice and put it into your mouth. That is something that they themselves have never seen in their entire life. So they view that as something that is very unusual, and like I said, possibly even disgusting. Okay? But for the Indians and many of our local Malaysians who are used to it, it's quite a normal thing. Cultural relativism is the recognition that social groups and cultures must be studied and understood on their own terms before valid comparisons can be made. Basically, it's the idea that in order to understand a culture, we need to look deeply into the culture and understand its roots. Why do Chinese people eat with chopsticks? Why do Malays eat with their hand? I'm sure there's a lot of history and background behind it. We try to understand the intricate details and background behind a certain culture before making our own judgments. What are some of the components that we have that is inside a certain culture? Sociologists find it helpful to break down cultures into separate components. Basically, we break it down into material culture. Now, this includes all objects that you see around you. Non-material culture. This refers to all the rules and shared beliefs that we have. And language. Language plays a huge part in any particular culture. Do you think it's possible to learn a language without learning the culture? It's almost impossible. Language is very, very closely tied to a certain culture, as we will explore in a short while. First up, we look at material culture. Material culture consists of human technology, all things that human beings make and use, from small handheld tools to skyscrapers. Basically, material culture covers everything from chopsticks to our clothes, to the shape of the plates that we use, our mobile phones, our computers, our temples, and all the architecture that we have surrounding us in our country. Non-material culture consists of the totality of knowledge, beliefs, values, and rules for appropriate behavior. The non-material culture is structured by institutions such as family, religion, education, economy, and government. So basically, this covers every single belief that is in a certain culture. How we pray. What is the practices that we need to do before we eat? How do we show our gratitude to someone who has done something good for us? How we should dress for certain situations. Now, the clothes themselves are considered to be material culture, but how we should dress, the belief of how we should dress, how we should put on makeup, the traditions behind color, now that falls under non-material culture. The gods that we believe in. What is the best way to bring up our children? How should we treat our government? All of those fall under non-material culture. What are some of the examples of material culture and non-material culture found in your own family? Alright, next up we look at norms. To put it in simple terms, norms, as you can probably tell, it's very much connected to the word normal. What is considered normal and what is considered to be unusual? We use the word, it is the norm to do something something. It is the norm to wear clothes, for example. It is the norm to introduce yourself when you meet someone new. It is the norm to say good morning when you see someone in the morning. Well, those are things that are considered norm. Norms is defined as rules of behavior that are agreed upon and shared within a culture that prescribe limits of acceptable behavior. So basically, it is what is considered to be good and accepted in a certain society. They define normal, expected behavior and help people achieve predictability in their lives. Now, as human beings, we all like a certain level of predictability in our lives. This is so that we know how to act in certain situations. What should we do when we meet our elders? What is the proper procedure to greet our teachers, for example? How do we deal with VIPs and government officials? What are some of the customs when you're giving someone a gift? These are just some of the examples of norms that you have society. While we're under the topic of norms, let's have a look at mores. As you may have noticed here, it's spelled M-O-R-E-S, but it is pronounced mores. Mores refers to strongly held norms that usually have moral connotations and are based on central values of a culture. Any violation of these mores usually have strong negative reactions. Some examples of mores in many cultures: desecration of a church, temple, of a mosque. Most cultures, we view places of worship to be very, very sacred, holy and important places. So the idea that we may destroy, we may vandalize, or we may even do something bad in a place of worship is considered to be unacceptable in most societies. Sexual molestation of a child. Children are considered to be very important in a society. In fact, many adults would risk their entire lives or spend their entire lives just to make sure that children get the best of what they have to offer. Now, why do you think this is? When you think about it, children represents potential. Children represents us, our future. Children represents innocence. They have the potential to be so many things. They have the potential to be good, they have the potential to be bad, based on the teachings that they have, based on the experiences that they encounter. So any form of abuse or molestation of a child is considered to be unacceptable in many cultures. Rape, murder. These are, of course, things considered to be horrible, horrible things to be done to a person, considered to be some of the worst sins or crimes that can be done to another human being. As individual human beings, we wouldn't like any one of these to happen to us. So the idea that anything that we would never want to happen to us, we wouldn't want to happen to someone else. Child beatings, also known as child corporal punishment. Now, this is a very controversial issue. Should parents be allowed to beat, smack, or even spank their child when their child has done something wrong? In most Asian countries, it's considered the norm to be able to discipline your child if they didn't do their homework, or if they didn't do their chores, or they have done something wrong. Meanwhile, in some countries like Argentina, Germany, Finland, Norway, and Denmark, child beatings is considered to be a very, very serious crime punishable by imprisonment. What do you think? Should parents be able to discipline their child by smacking or spanking them so that they would learn their lesson? Next up, we look at folkways. Folkways refers to norms that permit a wide degree of individual interpretation as long as certain limits are not overstepped. Violators of folkways are seen as peculiar, possibly eccentric, rarely elicit strong public response. For example, as a lecturer, what would happen if I wore t-shirt and shorts to a class? Now, of course, a lot of people will look at me. Why is he dressed that way? He's a lecturer. He should be dressed formally, in a manner that commands respect. Why is that? Because there are certain standards that we expect to see from a lecturer. Now, folkways change over time. Some of the examples that illustrate folkways are paying for dinner on a first date, giving ang pao or hong pao when you go for a wedding, food cultures, fashion. Now, let's talk about some of these folkways. Guys, do you think that guys should pay for the dinner on the first date? Girls, can you accept it if a guy chooses to split the bill during the first date, or even asks you to pay for the dinner? Culturally, guys are expected to pay, especially for the first date, to show how reliable they are, that they can take care of their female partner in the future. Giving ang pao or the red packet containing money when you go for a Chinese wedding. Now, this is very much considered to be a tradition in Chinese culture. What happens when you go for a wedding dinner and show up empty-handed? Now, most people would probably not criticize you or insult you or ban you from the wedding, but you may be seen as doing something that is weird or not following the tradition. Now, I've obsessed a lot of obsession with bubble tea, especially among the younger generation. I myself, I personally, I don't understand the obsession. I've drank bubble tea before. I find it's nice, I suppose. It's very sweet, but a man of my age, I'm 37 this year, I'm more concerned about the amount of sugar and the diabetes that it might cause. Okay? But I suppose for young people, bubble tea can be seen as a very important part of their life. I mean, look at this and this. Even during times of crisis, you will see long lines of people queuing up for bubble tea. Fashion. What is considered weird for a guy or girl to be wearing? Would it be weird if I showed up with a pink t-shirt? Can you believe it that there was a time where pink was considered to be a very masculine, a very manly color, while blue was considered to be a very feminine color? There are some evidence that shows that, especially in the early 1900s, pink was viewed as a masculine color, while blue was viewed as a feminine color. In fact, there was a time where it was very, very common for baby boys to be wearing dresses. Here's a photo of Franklin Roosevelt, one of the former presidents of the United States, in a dress. The things we considered as normal or fashionable or cool may be considered weird 10 years from now. So who knows what's the direction that we are heading in fashion. And then we look at values. To put it in simple terms, this refers to moral values. Values are defined as a culture's general orientation towards life, its notions of what is good and bad, what is desirable and undesirable. Values can be understood by looking at patterns of behavior. Now, look around the society around you. What makes a person popular? What makes a person likable? What are some of the characters that you can find in a human being that people don't like? Is it related to the way that they dress? Is it the way that they do their makeup? Is it the way that they speak? Is it the way that a person acts, the way that the words that they use, the way that they look? Are they tall? Are they tall? Are they short? What are some of the elements to be considered good or bad in a society's values? Is lying necessarily a bad thing? I think that in general, people consider lying to be a bad thing. But again, depending on the situation, we have words like white lies. That's it for part 1 of today's lecture. Let's take a short break. Be sure to join me back for part 2 in a short while. I'll see you shortly.